contact already, and the number 3 goes sideways fire into the wall. And he's already bounced off the side of the car next to him. I'm not sure if they just wobbled.
Welcome, race fans, to round 4 of the Genisus Extreme Trans Am Racing Challenge by HRSC. The drivers have been acclimating to their vintage sedan machinery and stare down at one of the older, more classic American circuits. Today, the drivers will race around Lime Rock Park for 99 laps, and you'll see it all live here on the Genisus Extreme Network. Hi, I'm Joey Atterbury, and joining me in the booth today is going to be Nicholas Hillebrand. Behind the scenes is our director, Daniel Costello, and I am extremely happy to be here. Round number 4 of this Trans Am series here on R Factor 2. We started out at the Moreno Valley Mall, had a lot of fun kicking up some sand over there in the middle of the desert, and then traveled up to Elkhart Lake, Wisconsin, had Road America for round number 2. Up into Canada for Mont Tremblant as round number 3, and here we are smack in the middle of June for round number 4, still in the Northeast, albeit back stateside for Lime Rock Park. And then after this, just a few more rounds remaining Bridgehampton, Watkins Glen, and then capping it off with Sonoma Raceway out there on the West Coast. And before we get to any action today here at Lime Rock, let's take a look at the previous round highlights.
So here's the starting order for round 3 then. Genisus Simoncic, possibly not a surprise there on pole position, and alongside him on row 1, Martin Beyer, Nicholas Kirsten in 3rd position. We get going and we are live then. And there we go, perhaps again no surprises there to see Genisus Simoncic out there in front, but he goes wide. That allows contact already, and Simoncic, your race leader from your race winner from round number 2 there, Nico, in immediate contact there, and again just showing how difficult these cars are to control.
I think just went a bit too wide. Like, you go over this crest here, the car just gets dragged to the outside, and then immediately it's a wide curve, but you know, there's only so much a wide curve can do. Now on the straight, and you can see that Camaro stretching its legs as they're now coming into the hard braking zone for that right-left sweep here. And a couple of these guys, of course, it's obviously also a thing of your car. So, and oh my goodness me, and that is Mike Mellon just completely misjudging the braking there. I feel like that was a little bit of passive commentator's curse in Formula 1, and my goodness me, with the help of traffic there, Martin Beyer flying down the inside, over the crest, through the penultimate corner, now on the outside for the last corner, not quite able to put the power down like Genisus Simoncic, going 3 wide once again, through, just past Bruno Chacon, almost tandem drifting there, fantastic running from them both, and my goodness, that is a late move down the inside, just underneath the bridge, and Bougier goes past. Absolutely fantastic route there.
A real sort of burgeoning thing, a blossoming new thing here in sim racing is. Oh, that's
Let's have a look here.
Oh no, contact. Oh no. Figure out what exactly happened there with the two of them. So you can see Austin Birchfield gets a hell of a run here onto Mark Johnson here. I'm hoping it's not late on the brakes. It is late on the brakes. Sends it up the inside. The two of them. Oh, I thought the two of them avoided each other. I mean, there was absolutely no intent there from Birchfield. Tried to hold it around the outside. So we're watching the replay here. We're on board. A little bit of contact, a little bit of bumping. See, to be fair to Genisus Simoncic, he didn't really have any room. He didn't have anywhere to go there. It has almost left me lost for words. There's a slide up the inside there from Genisus Simoncic, and a big wobbly noise from Nico in the background there. How the hell did he keep that going here? This is just insane action, Nico.
Oh no!
Contact for the second time, and a well-deserved victory here for Ross McGregor, who crosses the line to take the win. Genisus Simoncic in 2nd position. It's then Matt Wright who will usher that car back home. 8 seconds to the poorer on Genisus Simoncic, but he will get 3rd place and crucially some big points for the championship. Then it's going to be Riley Lyons who will just hold on as Tom T absolutely sends it. Nico.
You saw all of the action in the previous round. Lots of contact, lots of arguments that probably happened in the virtual paddock afterwards. But we are here this time at Lime Rock Park, a very simple circuit at best, and it's known as the bull ring in real life. You really got to be familiar with the right-hand turns around this place if you want to capitalize on passing. Really, the only big passing opportunity is down into turn number 1, and that is right off of the front straightaway. It provides the biggest brake zone down there, so you can usually make a lunge, and then after turn number 2 comes turn 3, the only left-hander on this entire track, and you got to be able to roll the speed through there. Typically, a lot of these drivers and crews should actually set this car up for right-handers only, so getting through that single solitary left-hander is actually a little bit tricky, and I understand, Nicholas, you're finally with us in order to cover the rest of the track map, because I am at the coolest, most important part, the part that everybody knows, the jump.
Yeah, absolutely, the uphill. For this race, of course, we're using that absolutely phenomenal non-chicane layout, which I think, honestly, it's almost a crime, to not be using the non-chicane layout. Well, to be using the chicane layout as opposed to non-chicane. And I think especially for this race, with these 5-liter V8 monsters, it'll be very, very interesting to see them, just go in there with full speed. Well, sometimes maybe even side by side and maneuvering through traffic as well.
And then after the jump, you got 2 right-handers, and crucially, that final diving turn, the final right-hander, it is so easy to get wrong, as you really have to get the front end on these big, heavy cars to bite, because if you don't get that thing down towards the apex, it's just going to wash you all the way out to the outside of the racetrack. It's not uncommon to see a lot of these drivers actually make contact with the tire barrier on the left side, and a lot of them try to force the steering wheel back over on the right and actually end up on the driver's right wall, which is definitely what you don't want to see. And we're going to bring up our standings, our championship standings right now. Rafa Racing Club's driver Jurne Simoncic currently standing on top there. Devin Braun chasing him in second place. Tom D is in third. Askari Kantanen is actually tied there for the third place. Matt Wright, part of the CUDA crew, in fifth. Ross McGregor, sixth. David Mrotzek in seventh. Nicholas Kirsten in eighth. Riley Wyans in ninth. And Jackson Robillard, that real world racing driver, rounds out this top 10 in the standings. But, if we're going to be talking about standings, Nicholas, we can't forget about the AMs as well. We've got the 2 different classes.
Absolutely. Nikolai Babenbeck and Chris Gordon are leading the M class with a very strong showing from Rally International so far. Mark Johnson in second place as well, joined actually with Chris Gordon in points after a phenomenal round at Montpellier. Then, of course, Mike Mallon, a man that started leading the championship in race 1, but very unfortunate in the last 2 rounds. Steve Carman in fifth. Then John D from JTD Racing, who races together with his son Tom, who's in the pro class. Then in 7th place, Filippo Marazzi. In 8th place, Mefanui Fleur. Then Igor Polyakov. And in 9th place, joined at the same point as him, Ricardo Mendes.
Really cool that we've got the 2 different point standings between the pros and the AMs, and I believe we actually already have our starting grid that's going to be popping up on screen any minute here for our 99-lap race here at Lime Rock Park. Actually, Reese Gardner, who was sharing the commentary booth with me earlier for a Lotus race, is your pole sitter in the number 94. Martin Bayer second, then third and fourth there. Matt Wright is fifth, Nicholas Kirsten sixth, Riley Wyans in seventh, and Mattis Iskanitis here in 8th place. We'll also cover this next page with Jackson Robillard, 9th, Darren Andrews, Austin Birchfield, and Dylan Beveridge in 12th here, Nicholas.
Yeah, and really strong showing. And then in 13th, Robin DeVos, 14th, Steph Hermans as the pole sitter for the M class. Then Declan Brush moved down from Pro to Am for this round. Then David Purchase in 16th. 17th, Paul Starsovs for Farcops Racing. 18th, Chris Gordon. 19th, Gerard Rion. And in 20th, our guest starter for this round, Jason Field. 21st and 22nd, Bruno Chacon and Filippo Marazzi.
Let's see here, I believe that is going to be it for the starting grid here. And we're just going to be waiting to get the cars lined up and away on the initial start of this race. Now, this is a 99-lap race here at Lime Rock Park, and I'm really glad that I have you in the booth here with me this time, because there is going to be a little bit of some pit strategy. Have you got any maybe inside word? Is this going to be a one-stopper, a two-stopper, a three-stopper? What should we expect out of this one?
Honestly, fuel-wise, I think it should be a two-stopper, but potentially it could be worth it to actually try and run a three-stopper here, you know, because this track, it will be quite heavy on tires, I do believe, especially with them pushing very, very hard against each other. And, 99 laps around here, we have a track temperature of 47 degrees Celsius. So the track is absolutely cooking, and these tires will be screaming for mercy after the first 20 laps already, I think.
And the front right, especially. You know, this circuit is pretty much all right-hand turns, so the entire left-hand side of the car just takes an absolute beating. Couple that with how heavy these cars really are. That front left tire, you gotta take care of it. We were talking with this driver right here, Mr. Gardner, Reese. He said that if you two-stop it, your front left is still looking pretty low in terms of that tire percentage at the end. So I think that the management is definitely still going to come into play here. And if you don't two-stop it, if you're trying to one-stop it, you really have to manage that front left tire. That's going to be something you're going to have to try to do around 99 laps when you need the front left. You're leaning on it every single turn here. If you ask me, I'm going to take at least two stops. I want the tires underneath me here.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you, Dan, especially, with other tracks, for example, with Road America, where we saw Yannick Simoncic working with his teammate, David Mrocek, to get a bit of an advantage, honestly, It's really difficult to actually save tires, save fuel here, because this is, as you said, the bull ring. You can't really hold back here. You have to be on it constantly. And Yannick Simoncic right now, he has enjoyed a very dominant display of himself and his teammates so far, with Ross McGregor winning the last round after a very dramatic last lap. But right now here, I think you will be looking at, a very difficult situation, because he is surrounded by the CUDA crew.
It is Yernej Simoncic starting third and Matt Wright fourth on the grid, but it's all that green and gold number 94 setting the pace through the final turn. That is your pole sitter on driver's left-hand side. He's going to wait patiently until he sees that green flag in the initial start zone, and then he will unleash the fury of all 8 of those cylinders. As he stands on the loud pedal, we have got a green flag at the Genisus Extreme Trans Am Series here. You dive down into turn number 1, flames spitting out the side of all of these vintage Trans Am machines as you bend around turn number 2. Careful not to squeeze on the gas too early here. The rear tire is still definitely very cold. Now through the bending only left-hander turn number 3. Jump it over this little curb here, put the power down, and down a squiggly short back straightaway. And actually, we've already got contact a little bit further back.
And I think that was some contact, I think, if I saw correctly, from Robin DeVos with Dylan Beveridge. That just might have gotten a little bit wide out of that right-hander before the uphill. And really unfortunate. I think Dylan Beveridge didn't lose too much time, luckily. But, absolutely insane. I think Ross McGregor might have missed the start, actually. So I think, something must have gone wrong there as well.
Definitely still getting everything sorted here, is already clicking over, and we see just kind of, if you watch the timing and scoring pylon, you'll occasionally see some yellow flags pop up in certain sectors, but Lime Rock Park is a very short circuit. We are going to be clicking off the laps very, very quickly here. I believe this is lap number 2 under green flag conditions as we're watching one of these old Camaros. I believe this is the number, I believe it's the number 1010, I believe. He's currently chasing down the front of the field. This is Darren Andrews in 9th place. I'm sorry, the number 9 Camaro. He's got a different number painted on the hood. I was a little bit confused there for a second.
Yeah, I think might have mistaken with the car in front, because that would be the number 010, Montes Genisus. And yeah, I mean, we have a lot of different numbers for this, of course. We also actually have number 42 and 042, so I can understand when there's some confusion here throughout the race. But, you know, these guys are all over each other. There's a big, long line forming right behind Martin Bayer. And Martin Bayer, actually, you know, we saw it in the highlights earlier, had one hell of a race already at Mont-Tremblant last, 2 weeks ago. And, you know, with the very man right behind him as well, Jenny Simoncic, and the man who's leading them all right now, Rhys Gardner, actually missed last round. So I think right now, all these guys are quite happy with how things are going. Martin will probably want to have a sort of rematch after that dramatic collision. But yeah, we'll also see a replay, I think, here.
I think that this is the opening lap incident. You had called it with Robin DeVos here. This is through that little short shoot right-hander, and just got out wide a little bit, got loose, and then came back across the racetrack. I think made contact with one of the other cars. You see him falling back a little bit, but thankfully there wasn't any spin. All of the cars are still pointed the same direction, and they keep racing. But this is the front group, and Rhys Gardner has really run away. He's doing 55-second laps out front, while Martin Bayer here in 2nd place. I mean, he's doing a fantastic job. He's holding off Yerne, but he's fallen back 2.5 seconds now. The last lap was 3/4 of a second slower than our leader. And when I see a big train forming up, I tend to think that there's a cork in the bottle, that they might be a little bit off pace. But guess what? Lime Rock Park, we called it already. It's known as the Bull Ring. It's incredibly difficult to pass. And when you're in this position, such as Nicholas Kirsten or even Simoncic right in front of us, it can get incredibly frustrating knowing that you almost have to put the bumper to one of your competitors in order to get the door open just to even make a move. That's how flowing this circuit really is.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm also thinking Martin Bayer and Rhys Gardner are obviously both teammates for the CUDA crew. These guys, together with Matt Wright, you know, German-Australian team, a wonderful lineup of guys. Know them quite a bit as well, all of them very involved with historic racing. I think Martin Bayer might actually be holding back a little bit, because these guys, of course, might be sharing a pit box since they're in the same team. R-Factor 2 can sometimes assign those a little bit differently depending on the weekends. And right now I think Martin might be slowing a little bit to try and make sure that Rhys might get a bit of a further getaway, might build a bit of a gap, and you know, to see then if it's pit stop time, that they just have a little bit more of a time frame where they can just all sort each other out when they all come in.
We're watching Austin Birchfield get back out onto the racetrack there, and now this is Dylan Beveridge back here in one of the Ford Mustangs. Got to give a shout out to those Mustangs. I spent a lot of my professional racing career in the Boss 302R, albeit the new one, and hang on to it, Dylan. That was a big wag of the tail trying to put the power down, but thankfully was able to catch that tank slapper. Now you just got to be careful because everything is really hot and warm. You don't want to try to overheat anything else. As Matt Wright in one of these big old CUDAs looks down to the inside of turn number 1 on a Mustang, and looks like he will take away that 4th place position. So move the number 49 inside there. And also you see the number 5, that's Riley Wyans, trying to get the elbows out, but I think that Nicholas Kirsten's going to be able to slide back in front with that sole left-hander and only give up 1 position there in the course of those few laps, or I should say few corners. And Nice defensive play there. Sometimes you have to play the over-unders at Lime Rock. Get that driver just a little bit off of the racing line, and then you see how much these cars are actually jumping on the uphill. Nicholas, are these drivers lifting off of the gas as they come up the uphill to prevent wheel spin, or are they just staying flat out in these things?
I could imagine they're probably more likely to be lifting off to prevent over-revving, since, you know, that the big problem here would be engine damage. These are older cars, of course, and going over the safe revs would actually be a bit of a problem, as we now actually. Not too much with safe revs or anything. Side-by-side action once again through turn 1, 2, and now coming into 3. Martin by again is Simoncic side-by-side. Can Martin keep it down around the outside with that CUDA? But I don't think quite. Yannick seems to have gotten a better exit out of turn 3. Now to the uphill, and I think that's him getting past. Yeah.
It's going to be difficult to really counter unless he's able to do an over-under, but he slides back in behind Simoncic here, so I think that number 24 of Bayer did a terrific job to kind of hold him up for a handful of laps. You know, we're pretty much on lap number 10 right now, and Reese Gardner in that CUDA crew is 5.4 seconds out in front. You see him already spitting the flames on the brakes down the turn 1 brake zone while these guys were just still on the straightaway. And actually, I think I saw one of the cars maybe putting out a little bit of smoke down that front straightaway there. So just going to have to keep an eye on all those engine temperatures. Make sure you don't pick up any of that engine damage like we were hearing Nicholas say here, especially on the uphill. It's so easy for those revs to go way up there, and some of these cars, I don't know, do they all have rev limiters, or can you just rev them straight to the moon until they blow up?
I do think they have a rev limiter for sure, but, you know, there's a certain amount of safe revs, so to say, that these guys, you know, can run. And of course, over that, you can just try and rev it over that a little bit, you know, in case of, you know, just before the upshift on a shorter straight, you just want to push it a little bit further, get that extra little bit of space to accelerate before having to shift up. Oh, and now down into turn 1. That's a slight lockup for Martin Bayer as well, but he does make the move stick very, very nice.
I love having you in here because you were making the comment that I think that Bayer was maybe holding up the crowd a little bit, and I think that Yerne realized that, got past him, but then all of a sudden, Martin put his foot down and says, you know what, I can play this game too. Let's just fight back and forth for this second place position, and this is actually extending the gap to Reese Gardner. What was 4.5 seconds is now approaching 7 seconds between first and second place. So this black and silver number 24, really just the cork in the bottle, and everybody is going to have to find a way around. Literally, this is why Lime Rock Park can be one of the most frustrating racetracks as a driver. You gotta figure out a way around the bull ring.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing that I just saw as they came down the front stretch, actually, we did mention temperatures here already, and right behind the car that we have on focus right now, Matt Wright, the car behind that, that's the number 3 of Nicholas Kirsten. He was already starting to trail some smoke from engine temp. So I think these guys will also now have to have a look at, hey, can I actually keep going in the slipstream? Do I have to go outside the slipstream to actually cool my engine a little bit?
I wouldn't be surprised, and you've said it a few times, these are not modern machines, so the cooling, you know, the revs up there, you can kind of call it, get into the danger area a little bit easier, right? It's not just like all of a sudden everything's going to break on you, but you have to treat it with a little bit more respect. If you're tucked up behind the bumper and you got all of those hot EGTs running straight into the radiator, well, guess what? Things are going to get really hot, and you see the flames spitting out the side. These vintage cars put out a ton of heat, and look at the number 3 have a huge power slide moment going into turn number 1. But thankfully, Nicholas Kirsten was able to save that. Did you see that?
Just on the border of the grass. He almost threw it into the grass there. Very, very, very close. Really well caught from Nicholas. And meanwhile, right ahead of that, Matt Wright actually got past Yannick Simoncic as well. So the CUDA crew play has actually worked out in the end. And, oh, that is another Mustang that didn't get us lucky, I think.
this is Dylan Beveridge in this number 15. You see him pulling off to driver's left, and I see all sorts of smoke coming out from underneath the hood of that car. I wonder if it just got overheated. It looks like he's pulling back out onto the racetrack as we check out the sprightly tortoise Mustang here, driven by David Purchase. And just to let everybody know, it looks like our top 10 is running in the pro class. We haven't really mentioned the pro versus AM class yet, but in 11th place right now is our leader of Steph Hermans in that AM class. The number 503 Pontiac Firebird is just a few cars ahead of the ones we had pictured on the screen right here. As we go back to Yerne, you had just mentioned that he had lost this position to Matt Wright, and here's the pictures of it. He's now 2 kudos ahead, and technically 3 if you can actually see Reese Gardner up in turn 1.
Yeah, I think that's really been absolutely, game set match for the CUDA crew so far in the race. So far, the Barracuda seems to be the better animal compared to the Firebird around this track. But at the same time, if I see that correctly, Reese Gardner is starting to catch up to lap traffic. On the same note, I did see in the replay what happened to Dylan Beveridge. He did seem to outbrake himself slightly and tap Doc Slappy, or David Purchase, in the back. David Purchase lost it around to the inside of turn 1, and Dylan Beveridge made a point of actually slowing down on the outside grass to let everyone, behind him through on purpose, make sure that everyone gets through safely, but to make sure that David Purchase would stay ahead. So a very nice showcase of a gentleman's agreement here.
I want to get a little bit technical with you and ask you a little bit about some fuel stuff over here. If we're going to be doing a 2-stop strategy, that means the first pit stop will be around the lap 30 to 35 mark, 33 if you want to split it exactly by the math. Is there the capability that if you're in a position like Yerne is right here, can he save maybe a little bit of fuel in order to pull an undercut or an overcut potentially, as it looks like Matt Wright slides up the inside, as I believe that's Martin Beyer having a little bit of trouble there in turns number 1 and 2, but I want to get that. Can you pull an overcut or an undercut? Can you save enough fuel in order to have an alternate strategy?
I think undercuts or overcuts will definitely work, since the pit lane is so narrow. Of course, we don't have a pit speed limit here. It is the 1970s after all. But I do believe that, Yannis Simoncic is mastered fuel saving. I'm not quite sure if he can fuel save 15 laps, though. I think it's more the case of, him fuel saving as much as possible behind these other cars here. And then essentially trying to... Oh, that is a double slide from the 2 Kudas in P2 and P3. But yeah, maybe just saving enough fuel that he might have a shorter final pit stop, so he has less fuel to add. And, of course, these tire swaps and refueling are, of course, concurrent. So, yeah, it's all a bunch of strategy here now.
That was exactly the point that I was getting at. Yeah, I don't think we're going to see anybody completely change their strategy, let's say from a 2-stop to a 1-stop, but I think the name of the game when it comes to fuel save is you just have to save a little bit more than the car that's in front of you, because like Nicholas was just saying, what happens is that it makes less fuel to put in at the final pit stop. If you have to put less fuel in the car, well, guess what? That means a shorter time on pit road. That's a quicker pit stop in which you could potentially pass your competitor who has to take a longer time on pit road, putting more fuel in the car. So it'll just be really interesting to see, can 1 or 2 of these cars play a little bit of an alternate strategy, maybe go on a little bit of a different fuel stop and pull that overcut or undercut and have a shorter pit stop, maybe capitalize on some traffic also that might come into play. We haven't even mentioned that with 20 plus cars at Lime Rock Park, things can get pretty busy when you start catching some of those lap cars, especially if they're off pace just a little bit. And Nicholas, there's not always everywhere to get out of the way here at this small circuit.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the reasons specifically why I chose this circuit for the series, not just because I love Lime Rock Park in general, it's a fantastic little track. It's also because one of the earliest racing memories that I have. You know, like one of the ones that stick the most to me are from the early 2010s in the American Le Mans series, with all four or five classes at that point, you know, with LMP1, LMP2, LMPC, GT, and GTC, all around here, around 40 cars, and absolute mayhem for the entire race. And I thought, yes, of course it's chaotic, but it was so cool. So even if we don't have as much of a speed difference here, you know, I think, you know, with more than 20 cars already, it's very, very exciting here. I'm pretty sure that if we didn't, if I didn't misschedule it to be on the Le Mans weekend, then we could probably have had around 30 cars, honestly, around here.
It is a real-world Le Mans weekend. Unfortunately, I don't have it on the TV behind me right now, so I can't let everybody know. But look at the action going on right at the front of the field. We had just said lap traffic might come into play, and there was a good example as two of those Cudas dove to the inside of turn number 1. But even before that, Simonjic put the bumper to the number 24 of Martin Beyer on the downhill. He was saying, hey, if you don't get through this final turn, I'm going to put the throttle down and I'm going to drive straight through your car, because I think that Yerne might have the speed to lead these guys, but I think the Cudas might just have a little bit more top speed, and that just adds to the frustration here at Lime Rock Park, that if you know you're faster than the car in front of you, but you can't get the run down the straightaway, how do you end up passing them?
Yeah, that's one of these big questions that we have around here. You know, these cars have very, very different strengths. So, for example, you know, we have the Firebird and the AMC Javelin, which are extremely good at turning. You know, it's just generally these low to mid-speed corners. You know, they are fantastic at putting their power down, easy to fuel save with, and, you know, that's what Yannick Simic is using, of course, to his advantage. The Cuda is one of those perfect cars that's in the middle of it. Same as the Mustang, though the Mustang is a bit of an all-rounder. And, for example, then we have the Corvette, which is... the wrong Chevrolet car. The Camaro, of course. The Z28.
We'll start with a C.
Yeah, of course. But, yeah, the Camaro is a lot more for straight-line speed. So you could see there that at Road America and at Riverside, the first 2 rounds of the season, those were a lot more pronounced.
Look at Yerne just, and this is what I was talking about. He's on the bumper coming down the downhill, and then by the time they get into the brake zone of turn number 1, those Cudas just in the motor underneath them are able to pull out a couple car lengths, and it makes the driver have to make this super lunge into turn number 1 that he knows that he's got no shot at making. So I do have to give a tip of the cap to the driver of the number 17 here. He's staying within the red mist of the helmet so far. We are only working lap number 22 right now. Got a long ways left to go to still be frustrated here at Lime Rock Park. As we check in on Jackson Robillard, I mentioned that he is one of the real-world racing drivers, very successful in his professional career. Always fun to get these real-world guys participating in the sim. And even here in the RF2 stuff, great to have this name here competing with us, and he's doing a terrific job hanging out in 8th place right now, currently chasing down Nicholas Kirsten in that Mustang, who has had a little bit of an adventurous race. And you see the Camaro directly in front. They're all just kind of wiggling around. So this battle is Camaro, Mustang, Camaro, a little bit of a sandwich. And look at how loose that number 3 was. You gotta be loose in order to be fast around this place.
Yeah, loose but controlled, and that's the big, you know, razor blade that you basically have to dance on. And you could see that on the uphill here again. Like, let's have a look at this from Jackson Rovillard's place. And whoa, did you see that? He almost flew right into the barrier there.
That's what happens here, and every single lap is like that. You're just flirting with the edge, and you gotta get the run up the hill. And as a driver, I look at that corner. There's a lot of stuff going on. I'm going to ramble here for a little bit. Uh-oh, it looks like there's a little bit of smoke, actually, from Nicholas Kirsten right in front. Maybe that's just a little bit of those temperatures getting hot following directly behind somebody. But what I was going to say about the uphill is you have a tremendous advantage going in there, meaning you go from flat ground to an uphill. That means the car is going to compress. When you get that compression, that means extra grip. The driver knows that. You can actually charge in there a little bit faster than what you want, and all of a sudden the car grips up, and Jackson Robillard goes in maybe a little bit too fast. Thankfully was able to catch the car mid-corner before it got into that tire wall, but getting to my point, that compression is one of the reasons why that corner is so fast and really allows the launch up the hill to get that jump in airborne.
And I think that's one of the beauties of the circuit, you know. It's just so strategic how you want to set up a pass, and I wouldn't find it too alien with these guys in the later part of their stints. A couple of them are obviously holding back on their tires as well. If they might try to set up a pass right after that jump, you know, because as we saw, you can take a couple different lines through here. We have once again Yannick Simicic and Martin Bayer, you know, basically completing their battle that they had last week, well, the last race, until that dramatic collision out of the hairpin at Circuit Mont-Tremblant. This is one of these things, you know, you can set up passes around here everywhere pretty much, but if you can complete them, that is a whole different question. And meanwhile, Yannick Simicic, of course, he probably wants to get past Martin Bayer as well. But meanwhile, if he holds back a little bit too much, or if he tries to attack a little bit too much, as we have a couple of back markers in a tussle there as people are going past, that allows Yannick Simicic to slip through. You know, these guys will attack from behind as well.
That's honestly what I was waiting for out of this number 17, is that you might not have the faster car in terms of the straight line and ability to pass into the brake zone, but when things get busy on the racetrack, when you got lap traffic, when you got cars sliding around, I believe that that's when you can take advantage. If you've got an A+ on your score for racecraft, you just need to be there in the mix when those opportunities happen, and then you can take advantage. So he really throws the car into the downhill section here, trying to keep up with that second place orange Barracuda, that number 49. But look in the mirror, because here comes Martin Bayer once again. He was taking a look down into turn number 1. So even though that Urne was able to get around him, he still has to look in the mirror. And this is our leader. Reese Gardner has led all of the 27 laps that we've completed so far. He's up to a 13-second gap over that group that we've been watching. He had made his way through a bunch of traffic in the previous handful of laps, did it nice and clean, and really he's going to be probably a handful of laps away from his first pit stop of the day, at least if he's doing it straight by the map.
Yeah, absolutely, and quite honestly, you know, it's always great to see Reese on the grid here. He's one of my first teammates in sim racing, actually, when I started back in 2013, 2014. And yeah, we took part together on rFactor 2, actually, in the Virtual Endurance Championship. I also started watching his videos back then at the same time, or actually a little bit earlier than that. And, you know, Super Series track guides, I think everyone should have seen those at some point. Makes very fascinating sim racing content, and, you know, always great to see him. Of course, always, you know, him racing with essentially one arm, you know. Always just fantastic to see him on the grid, fantastic to see him doing well, and yeah, right now he's just having the race of his life.
And if you guys don't know what Nicholas is talking about, Reese is one of the funniest guys I have definitely had the honor of working with. He's always got a great attitude, and he will bring humor to every situation, just like all of the Australians do. It's always great to see him here in racing, and he's really stretched out a fantastic lead. This second place battle is still extremely strong, and is this the moment that Urne looks to the inside? Does he try to make a deep lunge on Matt Wright? Not quite close enough, but we've got a fourth car that has entered the picture. That is the number 5, and actually there's the opportunity. It was Matt Wright that slid wide on the exit of turn number 2, so he got into turn 1 okay, but then lost all sorts of grip on the back half of the corner. That was what Urne was waiting for, and now he is up into second place. But the question still remains, can this Rafa Racing Club car run away from that CUDA crew, Or do those Plymouth Cudas still have the muscle underneath to stay with second place?
And not just the two Cudas, but Riley Wyans in the Ford Mustang, right behind that big American TTS. He's right on them as well. And I think some motorsport historic fans, they'll also recognize this livery. Riley Wyans is a huge fan of Ken Miles, so he actually chose his number, the car, and the paint job after Ken Miles' Ford GT.
Lots of American racing history, especially throughout all of these trends. I mean, you could probably point out a lot of the lists, and I recognize a lot of them. That Sunoco Camaro that we were seeing earlier. So really, really cool. And I talk about it a lot covering sim racing, that I think that's one of the fun parts about the virtual world, is that you can recreate these cars. You can recreate the rivalries and races and relive these moments that you only have gotten to see on the screen, and now you got to put the headphones on and grab the steering wheel and actually relive them yourself. It's a really, really cool thing to do, to be able to kind of revive history, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think one of the big advantages that we have in sim racing compared to, real life racing, of course we have the Monaco Historic Grand Prix, which is an absolutely stunning event, but it's still around the modern GP circuit. And how likely would it be that you actually have the old layout, and that Steph Hermann's off the road? But
this is big right here, though, because he's our AM leader, right?
Yeah, and he just dropped right back to in front of Chris Gordon, and there was a big one actually there just now in the battle for P3, 4, and 5. But that was with a back marker, I think. So, that was Declan Brush, I think, while they were lapping him. Something must have happened there.
And Declan was actually leading this AM class early on in this race, so I don't know what's going on with the AM leaders. It's just a spell that they've got to shake, but now the number 88 of Chris Gordon is going to try to take away the... He makes a lunge down into turn number 1 on Steph Herman, side by side. Looks like that number 88 Mustang will take away the AM class lead, as, oh man, still just struggling for grip as Steph Herman's. He really overheats, slides those tires.
Yeah, and that's one of these problems that you have with these cars, Around here, you basically have no chance to actually cool down your tires. You want to try and cool down the tires, you go slower through the corners, then you lose speed, then, it's just a vicious cycle. Like, this is almost pretty much a vicious circle, just with an extra little leg in the form of turn 1 around here. But, yeah, people sometimes look down on the circuit, for being, simple layout, how difficult can this track be? And that is the problem, you don't expect it to be an absolute killer of a circuit if you make even a single mistake.
It's one of the tough parts about Lime Rock. It's deceivingly difficult, right? Like you were saying, it looks very, very simple in terms of the track map. But you can't overdrive it. You have to be extremely patient everywhere you go. And here's the number 5, taking advantage late in the fuel run. This is Riley Wyans putting the pressure on Matt Wright for the 3rd place position. Look at the over-under. This should secure him the position, because there's a right-hander going to the uphill, so I expect the Mustang actually to slide back on the racing line. A terrific move from Riley Wyans right there. So the CUDA crew looking very, very strong early on, Nicholas, but it seems like maybe towards the end of the first fuel run, since we're already over lap number 30, the cars are starting to fall off just a little bit in the pace. The one exception, definitely Reese Gardner. However, he just gave up the lead because he made his first pit stop.
Absolutely, and actually a very big near miss there with Steph Hermans running into the pit lane for his pit stop. His pit box right behind that of Gardner's. Gardner's gets released, and Steph Herman's very, very quick on the reflexes, keeps the collision from happening, and oh my, that was very, very close. But yeah, this is like this opportunistic behavior of this track, You see a gap there, you can use it. You have to try and get everything perfect, and especially in this traffic here right now, it's just so difficult to get through it all without making a mistake.
We were talking about the overcut, the undercut, and what can potentially happen. I think there is a little bit of pushing and shoving right there with Riley Wyans coming down the hill, also the number 49, and we're going to be 3 wide down the front straightaway. Still some door banging going on between the Cudas and the Mustang as they slide their way through turn number 1. Looks like Riley will hang on to what is second place on the racetrack, probably third once all the pit stop cycles come through. But this group of cars actually stretching it out now an additional 2 laps over what our leader Reese Gardner has done.
Yeah, for sure. And I think Reese might have also noticed, hey, we're stretching it for a stint, it is possible, but maybe not the best idea, because of course he will be feeling his tires as well. And that is one of the things that I think right now with the Cudas is a bit of a problem, because these guys, they have these momentary bursts of speed, but yeah, they're lacking a bit in consistency, and I think that might be with the tires also heating up after, basically 34 laps now.
It's also difficult when you're locked in these battles not to overheat your stuff, right? If you get a run on somebody, you want to put the nose in, you want to make a lunge on the brakes, and if you get the power down coming out of the corner, you want to draft up behind them and take maximum advantage of kind of any advantage you have. So I don't blame the drivers and what they're doing, but sometimes you do have to remove yourself from the helmet, remove yourself from the race car, and kind of look at the big picture and say, what is best for the race right now? And is it following as close as I can, or is it cooling my stuff down and looking at the long run? I was curious to see what the lap times were going to be now that Reese has actually hit pit road and he's come back out. His last lap time, I'm checking a 56.3. Yerne out front of 56.29. I would call that pretty identical. And here comes one of the other CUDA crew members. This is Matt Wright hitting that orange number 49. Actually
missed the pit stop.
Overshot it. Yeah, just a little bit.
That's going to cost him a bit. But speaking of costing time, Yannick Simoncic is actually having some issues getting past traffic. So Riley Wyans and Martin Bayer were actually able to close the gap a little bit in the meantime.
And I think that's just going to play into the hands of everybody who's already pitted. This is kind of the double-edged sword, right? Is that if you stay out, you can technically make your second stop shorter on fuel because you don't have to put as much fuel in. But there's the other game of track position and just overall traffic. If you stay out and you run into traffic, that's slowing you down. If you pit at the wrong time and you come back out onto the racetrack into traffic, well, that's going to be slowing you down. So it's a little bit of a dice roll on where you're going to pop back out, especially without the true math and somebody like a crew chief on your pit box telling you exactly what's happening. But everybody's in the same boat, and you are going to have to get fuel and tires at some point.
Yeah, and this is one of these things, these cars also change a little bit with their overall balance the more they, run out of fuel, of course. Relatively big fuel tank here, as it's, well, quite usual, honestly, in race cars in general. So these cars will get, of course, a bit more tail-happy in general. I think the one exception to that in race car terms would be a Porsche with the fuel tank in the front. So that thing gets a bit more understeery in general, the more it runs out of fuel. But once again, and actually, Steph Hermans, I'm waiting to see where Chris Gordon and the other runners in AM actually end up coming out after their pit stop, because Hermans did lose a little bit of time. Of course, he did lose a bit of time earlier with his spin and then getting passed by Gordon as well in the AM race. But overall, he hasn't lost too much time in general, I think. So this is going to be one of those things, the ebb and the flow of the race, where we actually have to look how it actually ends up going.
And I'm just really curious to see if there's going to be any more fall off from our leader right here. His last lap time of 56.1, extremely fast. So I think that the pace is still maintaining, and I look at the lap count, he's pushing lap number 40 here. Does he come into pit road this time? No, he's staying out on the racetrack. So what I'm getting at if he can stretch it another 10 laps, right, without having tremendous fall off, it puts him right where he needs to be to one-stop this thing. Because Reese Gardner is still about 4.5 seconds behind Yurne right now. So 4.5 seconds, 10 laps, I can see that being eaten up, especially if this number 94 has got the fresh tires and he's got the hammer down, which he does, a 55.8 that last lap time, so 3/4 of a second faster than our leader. It's just going to be that cat and mouse. Can Yurne save enough to one-stop? Can he save enough to keep the performance in the vehicle to hold back this green and gold number 94 at the end of it all?
And my thoughts exactly are, if it's actually worth for him to be saving that much, maybe, you know, maybe do a bit of a splash and dash at the end to make sure, but maybe it's also just worth, you know, instead of a full stop, to just try go for a splash and dash and, you know, just pit a little bit earlier, get some newer tires, you know? Because at the moment, despite Gianni still having quite consistent pace, and of course, Riley Wines being here is a little bit of a blocker, as he's also getting held up a bit by traffic with Reese Gardner. That is still an enormously small gap, considering everything.
Check out Robin DeVos back here, chasing down Gerard Rion. Firebird versus Camaro here.
Oh.
Look at how close they get on the corner exit. The number 124 actually giving a little bit of a nudge right there. And uh-oh, what happened? Is this a mechanical failure?
I am wondering.
I would think that might have, just the way that he pulled off on the side of the racetrack, that screams mechanical failure. Some sort of problem happened, and uh-oh, I think that there was a problem with the number 94, because I'm looking at Riley Wyans out on the racetrack, and remember, Reese Gardner was trying to get around him, and Riley hasn't pitted yet. I think he was getting the elbows out, coupled with a lot of lap traffic. Reese Gardner, nowhere to be found, buried back in 8th.
Yeah, it basically happened right at the same time as Robin DeVos' issue. They both came up the uphill, right where Riley Wyans is right now, around lap traffic, right next to Filippo Marazzi, actually. And Reese, maybe a little bit too much rotation as he just landed after that jump. Maybe a bit too much on the throttle, but unfortunately spun away there, tried to catch it, but just very, very badly, like in a very unfortunate angle, hit that inside tire wall with his rear ends, and that basically just completely spun him around. He had to completely do a 180 to actually be facing the right direction again, and of course he didn't want to rejoin unsafely as there were cars oncoming.
This is one of the difficult parts about pitting early, is that you have to make your way through all of the cars. And when you're doing that, remember, you're no longer in first place. You're in 7th. You're wherever you came out of pit road. So if any of the other competitors are talking to somebody on the radio, or they're looking at the timing and scoring sheet online, or whatever they're doing to maintain the gaps, guess what? That's not the leader anymore. They're not necessarily giving as much respect, even though he was definitely the fastest car on the racetrack, and it was just pit stop strategy that put him back there. But that's just the name of the game with racing. You have to be ready for all variables, no matter if you put yourself in them or if you're just kind of put back there by pit strategy. And I just think that the number 94 got caught out, a little bit of a scrum. It happens, and now all of a sudden this race has completely flipped upside down. I think that Yurne is in the best position possible, unless one of these other CUDA crew members can really take the charge up front. But we've already seen Simonchech pass them all.
Yeah, I'm gonna be honest, I wouldn't say it's only the CUDA crew that can threaten him. You know, we saw it a couple of times already. If the traffic sits right in the favor of the people behind, Riley Wyans is one of those guys that can also start charging through the people. A very opportunistic guy. So one of these very dicey moments with the back markers that we had earlier, you know? The CUDA crew guys had to slow down a little bit, and Riley didn't take just one but 2 positions. So do not write that Mustang out of the equation just yet, as we're also looking at Bruno Chacon and Steph Ammons there, the AM battle right in front of them. And of course, these guys will prioritize their own battle over just driving to the side and letting Yerne through, as is of course allowed. You know, this is not Formula One rules. This is not, oh boy, there's a car approaching from the back, I have to slow down for 5 seconds. This is the faster car has to find his way around the others safely.
And like you were saying, Steph and this car right in front of Bruno Chacon, they're battling for this AM second place, so they are well tied up in their own fight right now. And Steph got a terrific run down the final turn on the front straightaway. Can he outbrake him and get the car slowed down here in turn number 1? Yes, and he actually keeps it nice and tight to the apex there. So move that number 503 into the second place in the AM class. It is running 12th overall, but hey, as long as you're spraying champagne at the end, that is really what matters. And this is, I believe, the 042 of Declan Brush back here. One of these Camaros. He's currently running in 15th place. So I had made the comment that Declan was actually leading the AM class at one point, albeit a little bit earlier in the race. So I think maybe he had a little bit of a slip up and is now recovering from it all.
Yeah, absolutely. So originally Declan was actually in the pro class, but you know, after the first couple of races, he basically came to me and was like, hey, I'm not quite comfortable in this. I can't go the pace these guys are going, but I am noticing that I can run with the AMs a lot better. And I said, hey, every race so far, you're still counted as a pro, but from here on out, you're racing as an AM. That's absolutely fine. And I think that's also, you know, not just a little bit of, you know, humility also there, you know, basically just saying, hey, I think I'm going to be suited better to this. It's also just, you know, seeing what makes for a better fight as well. And as we are mentioning the pro and AM category the entire time here, you know, with all the back and forth, we do have, of course, a point system here, a very nice one actually, which I took directly from the original Trans Am series. So it's first to 10th place per class, of course. And it starts basically first place 20, then 15, 12, 10, 8, 6, 4, 3, 2, 1 points. Quite nice overall, I think. And I think the one special thing about this overall is that teams with an overlapping class structure, so basically if a team has pro and AM drivers, the two best results, so the two best cars actually count towards the championship points. And overall, that is one of the things that, well, right now, the second place, well, actually, the leaders in the team's championship, Rally International, have actually utilized brilliantly so far, because they have one pro driver in Robin DeVos and 3 AM drivers. And so far, they've been able to get very, very good points through this, either through DeVos being in a pretty good position himself, or through the AM drivers being able to just place themselves absolutely perfectly all the time. So right now, they're actually a single point ahead of Rafa Racing Club.
Speaking of Rafa Racing Club, they are our race leaders coming up to the halfway point. You see we're on lap 49. Now, it is a 99-lap race here, folks. The opening lap was the pace lap, so technically it goes to 100 here on the timing and scoring ticker, but it is 99 laps of green flag racing, approaching halfway right now. And if you missed the first half, the first little bit, there was a huge domination by the number 94 of Reese Gardner, running way out front, having the CUDA crew teammates kind of hold everybody else up with their own pace, and it created about a 10 to 15 second gap between first and second. But unfortunately, after the pit stop, that green and gold Plymouth CUDA of Reese Gardner ran into a little bit of an issue. So it really has been all Jerne Simonchit for the previous, call it about 15 laps, maybe even 20 laps or so. And then comes the Mustang right here of the number 5 of Riley Wyans. I really do have to say that Riley has done a terrific job so far. He was able to race his way up to the back of the pack, back of the train, call it. He was the caboose, and then he passed the Plymouth CUDAs. He got past several of those other cars, and then actually had to fend off that fast, fresh tire charge from Reese a little bit ago. And Now I think that they've hit their pit stop window. They're still doing okay times. Riley's last lap time of 57.0. It may not be setting the world on fire, but he's still got 2+ seconds over the third place car. I do think that this one-stop strategy is going to work out for the front runners.
Absolutely, but I do honestly think, it's also a little bit of, they're profiting off of the mistake of Gardner, because if it hadn't been for that spin, I'm going to be brutally honest, reset so much pace of those new tires, I think he could have very easily gone for, that 2-stop and actually benefited from it in the end.
I agree. I think that the fastest car, unfortunately, had an issue. But, hey, that's racing. It happens. You want to see the fastest car win, but that's not always how the story is written. As Martin Beyer finally gets going out of pit road here, still got those vintage Trans Am rules, so no pit road speed limit to know of as he blends back out onto the racetrack, and probably for a good cause, because if he had to accelerate out of pit lane, we would have had a 3-car incident right there.
Oh, Jesus Christ, yeah. Yeah, the pit exit of Lime Rock Park is always very interesting, and especially with these speeds, I think it's actually a bit beneficial that we don't have a pit lane speed limit here.
Now this is our leader. He's officially past halfway. If I was the crew chief right now, I'd be calling in Mirne, because there's no real benefit to going past this marker. I guess the only benefit would be that you have fresher tires for the back half of the run, call it 40 laps instead of 50 laps, right? So you can kind of use up your stuff a little bit more, especially if you're feeling confident right now. But it's just making a longer and longer pit stop time, because you're burning more and more fuel. You got to put it all back into the car at some point. So just curious on the strategy for our leader. This is Mantis Iskanitis back here, hanging on to the 9th place position.
Yeah, he's actually missed a few rounds, but back in the saddle now. He did have a lot of stuff with home renovation, so not so much fun stuff in comparison to racing going on in his life. But yeah, I think for him it's actually quite cathartic that he's actually able to do a bit of racing again. Also, actually, one of our modders for the World Sports Car mod that we are basically utilizing for the 50s and 60s, of course, for the physics, and also actually working on a little bit of 3D goodness for some GT cars that we hopefully will utilize next year.
Ooh, now that definitely sounds fun. We'll have to keep our eyes peeled for more information with definitely that. And look at these. I gotta say, so I usually come from the world of iRacing, right? And cover a ton of stuff over on that simulator. So I don't get to spend a ton of time here on RF2 or even ACC or really anything out of the iRacing world. But I love seeing the yaw angles on these cars. They are really sliding on through the corners. And when we get those onboard shots, when we've got big groups together, you really get a good sense of how sideways these drivers are really having to hang out these cars, and it puts a smile on my face. Ever since I haven't been able to be in a real-world race car, I miss the movement underneath me. Whenever I hop in the sim, I can't ever feel anything underneath me, so seeing these cars and these yaw rates, it definitely takes me back. It's really, really fun to watch.
Yeah, I know what you feel. I know exactly what you feel there, mates. I'm one of the few, I think, where it's a bit of a skewed thing. So we have a lot of these success stories, of starting in sim racing, going over to real life racing, or, guys in real life racing who actually start doing sim racing later and then finding it as a big love as well. For me, it's a little bit skewed because I started doing real racing with slalom racing, and then I started doing sim racing. Through sim racing, I got an opportunity to do real stuff. Then through real racing, I got an opportunity to do sim racing again in the SRO Esports series when COVID hit. And then I became a Honda Esports Works driver, which gave me an opportunity to get into the real car again. And this all back and forth. Last car I drove on the track properly was a Honda Civic Type R TCR. And ever since then, it's been itching under my toenails to get back into a real car again.
I love that you brought that up, though, because what you're highlighting is incredibly important. We used to really separate the sim world and the real world, but ever since we had the pandemic a handful of years ago, it has changed how racing is perceived. And we have a lot of, call it mixed reality. I think we call them sim to reality a lot, where you get the crossover, and I think that's needed. There's so many of these really good drivers that understand the concepts, but they've never actually been able to get out in a real-world race car before. And we're not only seeing the real-world drivers use the sim more and more and more as a training tool, but these drivers that have never gotten the opportunity are finally getting to be put in real-world race cars. And trust me, it doesn't matter if it's a spec Miata or one of the little Genettas or a Legends car or whatever it is, a GT4, a TCR in your case, one of the coolest, most bad A front-wheel drive cars ever made. If you get behind the wheel of any race car, it is something to savor for sure.
Yeah, absolutely, I agree. Actually, a friend of mine, Rory McDuff, also who raced for Race Clutch before in the Le Mans Virtual Series, and another friend of mine who should be racing here today, but also couldn't make it, unfortunately, Devin Browner. You know, our second place guy in the championship at the moment, who will probably be overtaken after this race. Devin, I actually met before I started sim racing, so I met him during kart slalom days. Then I actually met him again through sim racing, and he's one of those guys in Germany. You know, we have a very competitive karting scene, and Devin was one of those guys who ran with a fraction of the karting budget of other people and was still running for race wins and all that stuff. And you know, unfortunately, you know, eventually money runs out, and my goodness, Janis Simincic just absolutely sent it down the inside into the pit lane. But you know, he's still able to show what he's made of in this entire situation here, in in these real competitions, even against people like Max Verstappen, Bono House, and other real-life drivers, you know. Devin actually, sorry to ramble on a bit about this, but that's one of these very funny things when I have to think about the pandemic again as well. Devin actually ended up coaching Emerson Fittipaldi, you know, the F1 world champion, in the car that he won the F1 world championship with in the half factor too. So it's one of these crazy things that we've had since the pandemic, where real and virtual really overlapped, and it's just absolutely wonderful to see.
Watching the racing now, Martin Beyer in this black and silver Cuda has been chasing Riley Wyans in that gold Mustang right in front of him with the red highlights. And we saw that Yerne just came down pit lane, so he officially has made his stop, got enough fuel, I assume, to get him to the end. I mean, he stretched it 58 laps there before he had to come in, so as long as he put the right amount of fuel in, he should have plenty to make it to the end. And so what was a 30-second gap back down now to about 4.5 seconds between first and second. And you see quite a bit less here between second and third. I think the comeback charge of Reese Gardner is still underway. Last lap time from him is a 56.3. He's currently hanging out inside of the top 5, so was far enough all the way back, I believe, as far as 8th place position. So definitely coming back as Genisus is trying to find a way around one of the slower cars and also trying to pass the number 3. I believe that's Nicholas Kirsten, as they're going to go side by side down the hill. This is a tight squeeze. Racing room given between both, but you see the momentum of Kirsten really carry him down the front straightaway. I think I saw that number 3 go off into the grass here at turn 1 about a dozen laps ago or so, and I think that's why he fell down the order.
Yeah, dropped a little bit further down, couldn't quite get it stopped in time, and yeah, it's just a few of these mistakes that really, really cost you, as they're still very much fighting hard. And yeah, that's one of the things that I absolutely adore about these Trans Am cars. You know, they are heavier, they do have a lot of power, and usually, you know, with the rule of thumb for racing is, you know, when you have lower power, it's usually better racing. But these cars, I think, due to them being so heavy but having that sort of power, they really lean into that weight aspect of the car. And that still makes for absolutely phenomenal racing, in my opinion.
I think that the racing was very close back in the day because they made their speed, just like what you're saying, they made their speed so different. I think in current racing, yeah, we look more towards the spec stuff, the lower horsepower stuff, because they race so gosh dang close together. Look at this CUDA really charged down the front straightaway. Gets it stopped before getting into the back of the Mustang, though. But back in this era, the cars had big motors, but the tires, they didn't provide near the amount of grip like what we have now with our current construction. So I really feel like the slow parts were actually the corners where everybody can get really, really close together. And then it's all about who can get on throttle the best and squirt down the straightaway. So yeah, big horsepower, that's actually where they stretched out a little bit. And now they get close in the corners. Just a different time era, cars making speed in a different way. But I agree with you, Nicholas, that I think that this group of cars presents incredibly close racing.
And this is the time period of Trans Am, basically 1968 to 1972. And as we've looked at them before as well, and two of the other guys who unfortunately DNF'd so far, Austin Birchfield and Robin DeVos, they actually ran with us. Riley Wines and I actually, a few months ago, ran a 1974 Indy 500. So with all the historic chassis, and basically all of us were given older chassis. And oh my goodness, there's a spin, and that is Steff Hermans. David Bacasellon has to avoid all of them, managed to keep it out of each other, luckily. But that did cost quite a lot of time. That was around 2.5 seconds that Riley Wines lost to the back of Janis Imicic there.
And a bit of a shame because Jerne got held up big time by traffic a lap ago. And that gap had come down to only about 2.5 seconds, so now stretched back out to 6 seconds. You see Simoncic braking for turn number 1 down there as these cars exit the final corner. And I thought actually that Martin was going to take advantage because he was way off driver's right, 4 wheels off, pin it to win it, Travis Pastrana style through the grass. I thought that he was actually going to pass the Mustang, but I think it just kind of stalled out with not quite as much grip up there. And now the number 4 car, I believe that car is just maybe on some fresh tires from a recent pit stop because you see him kind of slide the tail coming out of the corner. I wasn't expecting them to kind of throw it up the inside there on that left-hander. I think that even took Martin Bayer for a surprise a little bit.
Yeah, 100%. And these things, in traffic, it's always very difficult. And of course, David is also one of the pro drivers, so normally, like, if he didn't have an incident early in the race, he would probably be running in around this area of P5, P6 and stuff as well. Right now, he's running in P11 and a lap down, but again, this is the nature of the circuit. You make one mistake, you make a pit stop that goes slightly wrong, and you can easily just go an entire lap down because the lap is just so damn short.
Definitely hanging on to it, the driver of the 24, part of the CUDA crew. I gotta say, really a phenomenal job by all of the drivers that have entered today's race. Yeah, we've got a few that have kind of dropped by the wayside. Started with, I believe, 23 or 24 of them out there, and still have 18 cars running. Of those 18, the top 9 still on the lead lap, only have 1 car a single lap down with Chris Gordon. He is actually the leader of our AM class currently. And then have a bunch of cars that are 2 laps or 3 laps down. We were making the comment earlier that it doesn't matter if you're up towards the front of the field or a little bit further down, whether you're the pro class or the AM class. I think no matter which car you pick, there's strengths and there's weaknesses, but always the one constant is that there's going to be somebody to race out there on the racetrack.
And that is one of the guaranteed things here. I mean, we also have a guest starter here, of course. And I just want to give a quick shout out to him as well. I think right now he's in 16th place. No, that is 15th place. Jason Field joined this Discord less than a week ago. Basically just went, hey guys, I saw you guys were doing historic racing. I'm a huge fan of this. what have you got planned next? I basically gave quick run on, yeah, right now we're running this Trans Am series, you know. You can do a guest start if you want, but it's this weekend already. And he basically just went, yeah, okay, started doing laps, asked if he could do the guest start. And honestly, he's been running pretty clean so far. A few smaller mistakes here and there, but very nice running, you know, very consistent running. And I just absolutely love just the mindset of, yeah, okay, let's go racing.
Well, and you mentioned the performance. He's sitting in 4th in the AM class currently, so barring any sort of mistake, maybe out of the top few here in the AM class, and Jason Field could actually find himself on the podium on his first guest driving appearance. So, yeah, a terrific job by the driver, the number 48 in that Plymouth Cuda right now. A few laps down in terms of the big picture, but keeping it on the racetrack, keeping it consistent, and his fastest lap of 57.3, compared that to our AM class leader at a 56.7. So he's right there in the ballpark, less than a half a second, or I should say right about a half a second off in terms of the overall pace. Just doing a really, really good job. And I looked up at the lap ticker here, lap number 67 of 100. Oh, is that the number 5 car? That was Riley Wyans, our second place Mustang, flirting with track limits out there on the edge of turn number 1. Got to be careful. If you go too much further out there, you can definitely spin that car around. But I was mentioning the lap count because if you're going by the math, this is time for your second pit stop if you're doing a 2-stopper.
Yeah, and that would be for Reese Gardner. So I think in the next couple of laps, we would probably be expecting him in. And yeah, I mean, in this situation, normally, if not for that unfortunate mistake, I think we would be seeing him probably already past Janis Simoncic, if I'm going to be honest, because the pace he has put down in, you know, that second stint after his pit stop was absolutely blinding. So just really unfortunate for him. Now he's actually heading into the pit lane. And yeah, just filling basically up the car until enough fuel is in, changing for new tires again, and basically just finishing this race. If all goes well, and usually it should, then at least the Cuda group can look forward to a finish for P3, 4, and 5, which would still be good for the team's championship, of course.
Absolutely, especially if they can line them all up like that. We'll have to see over the course of the next 30 laps or so. Martin Bayer still just pounding the back of this Mustang. I'm sure that he is looking for a new car to chase, or maybe would prefer to see the front end in the rear view rather than staring at the back end of that car lap after lap. And our leader really hasn't let anything phase him other than the first maybe half of the race, first third of the race, where he was really just stuck in that track position game. He couldn't get around those Plymouth Cudas, but once he got that clean air, he has taken full advantage of it, and we really haven't watched him too much because he's been on rails. He's had to deal with a few little lap traffic incidents with getting around groups of cars, but he's done it quite nicely, level-headedly, and he's up to about a 7.5 second gap now, and currently growing over Riley back there in that number 5. So I think as long as Simoncic is able to keep it clean the final third of the race here, I don't see who's going to go up there and challenge him for the race win.
Yeah, I would tend to agree with you. And as we know from the races so far, and just in general from his esports career, Janis Simoncic is a guy that doesn't really make a lot of mistakes. You know, he's one of the most consistent guys I know, while somehow also, you know, being pretty much right on the limit and also saving half a liter of fuel. So to put it in the perspective of another esports competitor, he's one of those guys that's really annoyingly good for no reason, seemingly. But yeah, I think it's all down now to consistency. Janis got that pretty much covered very nicely. But of course, you know, you can't call the race until the fish is eaten, and we've got about 30 more laps to go pretty much here. And of course, that's 30 more laps with traffic as well, where anything could happen.
That is the key part. Traffic and Lime Rock Park, anything can happen. Yeah, I was kind of almost gifting Simoncic the win already, but trust me, folks, I have learned from racing that you never claim a win. You never get cocky out there until you physically cross the line and see the checkered flag in your rear view, because anything can happen, whether that be a mechanical failure in the car, or here in the sim world, you can have power failures, you can have internet problems, you can have so much go wrong still. So yeah, nothing is guaranteed, as it's a little bit busy coming down the downhill here at Lime Rock Park. I recognize that green and gold car of Reese Gardner. He's trying to make his way through. I believe it might be Darren Andrews right in front, but got 5 cars, throw him under a blanket, and now we got contact. Even heavier contact as the number 94 plows into the quarter panel. I wonder if there's any damage on the front end of that one, but that looked like rush hour going into turn 1.
And there was 2 of the back markers, Bruno Chacon and Filippo Marazzi, that got together. Obviously no way for him to go, and in this situation I think he did get relatively lucky, Reese. That it was pretty much only with them already spinning out of the way, a slight nudge to the side. But yeah, exactly not what he needs right now. But yeah, it's just really unfortunate timing in that situation. One thing though, quickly running it back to what we were talking about earlier, nothing can stop Yannick Simondich. Well, Matt Wright, another member of the CUDA crew, just got out of the pit lane for his final pit stop, right in front of Yannick Simondich, right behind Niklas Kirsten and Mantas Iskanaitis. And that could be a situation of, you know, the leader getting slowed down behind the battle for people in... Oh, and that is actually Mantas running off. Is that commentator's curse?
That would be considered a commentator's curse. Is that your first commentator's curse, Nicholas?
Unfortunately not, but I was hoping that I wouldn't hit Mantas with it. And there's another big hit on the left side of the track coming out of turn 3.
Yeah, that's the number 42 car that was over on the left side of the track there. Not Declan Brush. Declan is the 042. But I believe it was one of the Camaros, so it could have been that. And then there's Filippo still trying to get back going again. That was from that turn 1 incident, so that number 27 now finally back out onto the racetrack, and he's actually going to give up a position to Jason Field. So, oh, and then look at this, Nicholas. We got Mark Beyer. That CUDA has made his way around the Ford Mustang. I don't think Riley seems too happy about it. Did you see the flashing of the lights and following the serpentine down the front straightaway? I think there's still plenty of fight left in this one.
I think he's been setting up that pass for the better part of, what, 30, 40 laps. And I think coming out of the last corner, he actually finally made it work. Got a far better run out of that corner. And I think also with a little bit of help of traffic, with Bruno Chacon returning to the pit lane. And Martin just played his cards exactly right there. Now making, of course, his next target, the man whom he had that bigger collision with at the end of, shortly before the end of the last race. We have, was that another? Okay, that's Declan Brush on the inside. I was thinking, I'm getting a bit paranoid now with, the first commentator's curse that I had in this race. Who am I cursing next? But luckily kept it out of the racetrack, and luckily no bigger accident there.
Well, I'll talk here for a minute, so I need you to stand up from your chair, do a little dance, get that curse off of you, and then we can bring you back into the commentary booth. But, and there's a little bit of a lockup from Martin Bayer, just trying to get that car stopped there for turn number 3. I always want to try to roll the maximum amount of speed, but he's just trying to run away from that Ford Mustang, quite honestly, as we check back in with the number 3 car. This is Nicholas Kirsten. He's had quite a few extracurricular incidents going on in this number 3, but he's done a good job. He just went 1 lap down a few laps ago, but is still hanging out inside of the top 10, right in front of Mantas Iskanaitis, like what we were saying. Those were the 2 cars that went in fully locked up into turn number 1 and eventually found the grass, but this number 3 car got around Iskanaitis of that number 010 back there. So I'm sure they'll kind of keep on scrapping. We're down to about 25 laps remaining here at Lime Rock Park. We're doing 99 laps under green flag conditions. here in the Trans Am cars. Chris Gordon, we haven't mentioned him too much, but he is actually our AM class leader, and he's looking pretty comfortable in terms of that AM class lead. He's got about 40 plus seconds, almost a full lap on second place.
Yeah, almost a blessing and a curse, you know. You would think if we're not mentioning him, oh boy, it's not going well, but well, Gordon just ran a completely error-free race, completely unspectacular, without any involvement with anyone else. It's almost like he basically just ran in a different time zone entirely, you know. He just showed up tomorrow for the same race, but just running it alone. And yeah, just staying out of trouble, staying clean, staying consistent, and that's how you win a race, I'd say.
Darren Andrews coming back out onto the track, and yes, that is how you win a race. You just got to stay consistent and just limit those mistakes out there, and you'll find yourself in the position to then challenge for race wins. That's kind of how you just have to put the whole picture of it together. Is it was Jackson Robillard going by Darren Andrews. I didn't even realize that this was for position. I'm sorry, I was sleeping at the wheel over here. So move Jackson in that multicolored 98 up inside of the top 5 into 4th. I think the bigger threat right now for these two cars is actually coming through the exit of turn number 2 right now, and that is the number 94. I sound like a bit of a fanboy, but he is still the fastest car on the racetrack, and I'm talking about Reese Gardner. He is only about 3.5 seconds back from this man right here, Darren Andrews, and with 20 laps remaining, he is doing laps, I'm checking, about 4 or 5 tenths of a second faster per lap than these two. He could take away 2 positions and make a comeback drive up into 4th.
And this is just race, let's be honest, you know. Even if he does make a mistake or something, that usually doesn't mean, like, as long as the car's still running, you know, he doesn't give up. He just basically goes right, head down, concentration face on, and maximum push, and that's when he delivers some of his best drives as well, you know. It's just absolutely great to always see him, you know, always basically keep in there, and you can see that gap physically shrinking. Unfortunately, right now we're seeing ahead of Darren Andrews, but his fellow Australian, Reese, is of course closing in from behind.
I can say through the uphill last time, Reese was 3.8 seconds back, and now he's 3.2 seconds back and closing. So yeah, it's coming out to be about 0.5 second per lap, maybe even more. You do the math, that is plenty of time to reel in 3 seconds in 20 laps to then potentially fight for a couple more positions out there. Riley Wyans, I've been keeping my other eye on this battle for second. He is all over the back in the number 24. I thought maybe that Cuda had saved a little bit of speed for the end after he had gotten by that Mustang, but if memory serves me correct and we go back in time about 30 laps at the end of their first fuel stint, it was actually the Cuda that fell off in terms of the performance. So this is maybe Bayer punching above his weight class right now and holding off a faster car as the Mustang almost scrapes the bumper.
I think the Mustang might be a bit easier on tires than the Cuda, in exchange for, you know, just pure pace from the Cuda around these, you know, mid to high speed corners, and just great to see these two just dashing it out right now. It's just, it robs my words, basically. I just absolutely always love seeing these cars, you know, slipping, sliding, you know, jumping over these crests, tackling these curves, as we just saw Martin Bayer do again, you know. The cars are compressing, you know, rocking back and forth, and with this slip angle into corners, it just looks phenomenal. You just don't have something like that anymore nowadays too often.
No, you really don't. The cars are hooked up, and when you turn the steering wheel, you expect them to respond exactly how you gave them the input, right? And back here, back in this era, it is a completely different style of racing, a completely different type of beast that you're having to grab the reins of and really control where it is going to go. And folks, what was 3 seconds, all of a sudden has just evaporated. Reese Gardner 0.5 second back from that Darren Andrews' number 9 Camaro as Riley Wyans continues to try to find a way around this big old black Plymouth Cuda in front. And since we've seen, you know, the majority of the race so far, Nicholas, I want to ask you, you've got tons of time in these cars in RF2 and putting together these races. What car and what pit stop strategy would you opt for now that you've kind of seen everybody else's play style and what they're putting down?
I know it was very high risk, and in the end, you know, because of that one mistake that he had, it didn't work out, but I'd still put my eggs in the basket of Reese Gardner with the Cuda with a 2-stop strategy, because that raw pace was just something else, I'm gonna be honest. So I think if it had been like completely clean, you know, so no mistake there in the lap traffic and, you know, just raw pace with him maybe finding a way past Riley Wyans a little bit earlier, I think then he would still very much be in the battle against Jane Simoncic, and especially on far fresher tires. And I think that's something that in these cars is just worth so much time, especially at a track like this.
I can officially tell you that Reese is now getting held up. His previous lap was a 55.8. That last lap of 57.0, and here it is. Here's on the screen. He is all over the back of Darren Andrews in that Sunoco-themed Camaro. And right in front of that Camaro is another Camaro of Jackson Robillard. So I think hunting season is on for this green and gold Australian Plymouth Cuda. Tries to put the power down coming out onto the front straight. You see the tail really squirming around. Looks to the inside of Darren Andrews. Oh, look at the Camaro with a huge late move. He's going to try to make a move on Jackson himself. Can Reese actually take 2 positions? He's going to get Robillard, and now he's going to have to come up with a new way around Darren Andrews, but knock one off the list.
My God, I think that was Darren getting caught out by Jackson braking a little bit earlier than he thought. So emergency evasive maneuver as Reese sets up for the uphill and actually makes it work. Jumps up the hill and this time keeps it completely straightened. Makes it for P4. Absolutely phenomenal, the scenes here at Lime Rock.
I love seeing it, a comeback drive, and I'm gonna go back to your point about the strategy in the fastest car. I think it is that 94 is just a little bit of bad luck, but can Jackson throw it down into turn number 1? He's got so much experience here at Lime Rock Park, whether it be in the simulator or in the real world, and you see Darren just bouncing it up over those curbs, trying to get whatever grip they can and throw it in, using a little bit of the grass to help rotate the car there through turn number 3, and little Scandinavian flip here from the 98 to get this car rotated. And this is where the move came from Reese the last lap on Darren. It doesn't look like Jackson is quite close enough, but maybe that Sunoco Camaro struggling a little bit through that tiny little kink on that back straightaway.
Yeah, just really, really difficult to see, you know. There goes a lot of setup work into these cars as well, and extremely delicate, of course, as well. So you can see, actually, you know, Jackson with the same car, but very likely in a completely different setup, also struggling for a little bit of rear grip at the exit of the last corner there. And you can actually see it, you know, these cars are sometimes, you know, almost jumping with the dampers and the springs compressing and, you know, sort of like hobbling. So these cars are always on the verge of grip, either sliding or this sort of like hopping almost. And these guys have to drive them in a way where it's, of course, preferably a little bit of sliding, but mainly, of course, proper grip.
It's I think you mentioned the razor's edge earlier. It's got 2 sides to it, right? You need the rotation in order to turn the car, but if you rotate it too much, you start to get too much slip angle, too much tire scrubbing. You're no longer going forwards at that point. You still need the forward momentum when it comes to that yaw angle. So I just think that it's the balancing act of how you do all of that, and that's what makes a great racing car driver, especially at the limit when the equipment isn't cooperating. you really just grab a hold of that steering wheel and are able to manage that balance yourself. As you see, this is a great example. Jax Robillard with pretty much worn tires, all the way completely gone. How much yaw angle there actually is going on inside that car. These drivers, they're officially wheelmen for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. It's almost more like inputs for a speedboat that he's doing, certainly, to get around these corners a few times. Oh, goodness, it's just absolutely phenomenal to watch, and especially at Lime Rock. In this layout, you only really have high-speed corners, except for the first two. Always at these slightly off-camber angles, and coming in, never really on-camber, basically, no banking. So it's really the car constantly fighting against its own G-forces,
We're watching Simonchek, and I agree, yeah, the fastest corners really are pretty much everywhere except, call it turn 1 right here. And even then, I wouldn't call turn 1 a slow corner. In everything that I've ever driven, it's pretty much a third gear corner. I guess if you got really tall gearing, it's the top of second gear, but I would really call it a third gear corner. And then everything else through the rest of the racetrack is either top of third gear or into the middle of fourth gear. You get to the top of the hill right here and you start accelerating down the hill. All of a sudden, this final corner comes up really, really fast. You got gravity pushing you down the hill. You got the compression at the bottom to really load up the car with extra grip, and you just send it through there. It's just a ton of fun to go out there and drive Lime Rock Park. It's a ton of fun to race here as well, but I think if you ask a driver kind of like Jackson right now, who's stuck behind Darren Andrews, it can also be a very frustrating place.
Yeah, and the frustration, of course, is, being able to make a move and, the difficulty behind that. But I think that's also just one of the exhilarating parts around the circuit. You really just constantly look for the enemy driver. I'm actually saying enemy instead of opponent, to just try and force them into a mistake, to put enough pressure on him, and figuratively, metaphorically, and quite literally break through their defense in that sense, and just be able to make that move. And you see here again, Darren Andrews tackling that inside curve a lot earlier, tackling it very, very hard to try and go on the accelerator a bit earlier, try and grip up a little bit earlier, and that gives him just enough space to stay ahead in front of Jackson Robillard into turn 1, even with the slipstream down the front stretch.
We are officially under 10 laps remaining here at Lime Rock Park. It has been one for the record books for sure. I think the fastest car got a little bit tripped up on their fuel strategy with other traffic going on, but that is racing. And Jurne Simonchek, he didn't have the easiest and cleanest first third of the race. He was really struggling with all of that track position. And oh no, here's an incident right in front of this group, and thankfully way off of the racetrack, but that was a huge accident, I believe, including Iskanitis back there. And I think even one of those cars was way up on its side. Thankfully was not on the racing line and doesn't really affect anybody else.
Oh my god, that was Reese Gardner. I think that must have been a miscommunication in... Oh no, that was a miscommunication in... Right in traffic. So Reese comes up on the racing line. I hope that we can get a replay from this in a moment, but oh my god, that is heartbreaking. Yeah, just David Bacateladon trying to avoid the slower moving car. I think that was our guest starter, Jason Fields. He was trying to avoid him and inadvertently came over into the racing line there of Reese Gardner. Steers a bit too much over, comes over a bit too much, and yeah, instant contact. And yeah, just DNF. And that is a heartbreaking finish to such a fantastic race from him, to such a fantastic recovery.
I think that's the best word, the recovery there. And yeah, he was up into a great points position to finish this one out. Definitely a little bit unfortunate with the number 94 is Urinate. He's just trying to hang on to this thing right now, this Firebird, putting all of that power to those rear wheels, really squirming around and launching him up over the hill here. He's going to be coming around to click over to lap number 93 here. Going to be about a handful of laps remaining, and he's got 11 seconds out front. I'm not surprised to see him kind of gap that out after he got the track position. Not too surprised to see a lot of these cars already one lap down. Lime Rock Park is such a short racetrack that if you have one mistake or a couple mistakes, you find yourself buried pretty far back in terms of that track position. It takes me back to the Grand Am days when we would have, you know, 2.5 hour races, sometimes 2 hours and 45 minutes. And yeah, if you get swamped on that track position, you are pretty much out there treading water, hoping for a yellow flag, hoping to get a lap back. And in the case of here, we don't have that situation, so you better keep swimming, and you better swim really fast. And in the case of Matt Wright, I believe that he's on a little bit of a fresher tire than what Jackson Robillard is on, and I think that Jackson might be under some pressure here down the front straightaway.
Yeah, very slight offset to Reese's strategy that Matt was actually running. And well, the one saving grace right now, you know, even though Reese disconnected now, or well, he NF'd, it's, you know, he is still 10th in the class, so he will still get his 1 point for the driver championship. And I think Matt Wright, right now, will probably be trying to get that fifth place, fourth place finish, sorry, that Reese was looking for before his accident. So Matt trying to carry on with Reese's legacy as he now takes the fight to Jackson Robillard. And if he has time then, you know, and that is the big question, if he has time then, if he's able to get past him fast enough, probably try and take the fight to his fellow Australian countryman, Darren Andrews in the Ward Camaro.
And if something looks familiar behind these cars, look at Robillard slide it out of the final corner. That's going to affect his top speed down the front straightaway. So here comes Matt Wright in that orange 49. Robillard gives him a huge hip check at turn number 1. The Plymouth Cuda goes spinning off into the grass. I'm sure that Matt won't appreciate that, but that's just part of racing. He chose the outside of the racetrack. I'm sure some stewards will probably review it at the end of it all, but what I have always been taught is that if you're going to make an outside move, especially at Lime Rock Park and how long it is, you better have faith in that inside car that they're not going to wash up into your lane. And knowing that Jackson's on some older tires, that's just a risk that Plymouth Cuda definitely took, and I think that he was expecting to be given room, but sometimes racing can get a little bit gray area.
Yeah, I'm kind of thinking Jackson was probably a bit too aggressive on the brakes, so I imagine that we'll probably be reviewing this after the race in a couple of days. Right after this race, of course, the report period opens. That's basically 24 hours after the finish of the race that we will have reports open. And I can probably imagine seeing this incident reported. And yeah, it is a bit tricky because on the turning point for the corner, I do think that Matt was actually ahead, and also while on the braking point, he was already ahead. So I think Jackson might have overcooked it there.
And if I'm going to armchair quarterback it, and I'm sitting in the race steward's perspective, 100%, right? You can't just go slamming into a car as we watch that green car go into the tire barrier back in the back shot of the screen there. But I agree with you. You can't just use up a car and not expect there to be any sort of repercussion. Now, coming from a driver's perspective, if I'm Matt Wright and I put myself on the outside of a corner, that's a risk that you're willing to take, right? You're hoping that the driver is not going to run into you, and if they do run into you, they're probably going to receive a penalty, and I don't think that's how Matt Wright wanted to see it play out. I think he wanted to get the pass done, but I just think from a steward's perspective, yeah, absolutely, that one's on Jackson Robillard, but Matt Wright knew exactly what he was doing, putting himself in that situation. As we see Celadon, that was the car that made contact with the tire bearer. He gets it down into pit lane, hopefully fix up any of those repairs. But our leader is going to be coming in, click it over to a few laps left remaining. Jurne Simoncic with now 12.5 seconds out front. It's actually going to be lapping Darren Andrews. That's that blue and yellow Camaro directly in front of him. That's 4th place overall. So I think that this has been a pretty dominating day from this Rafa Racing Club Pontiac Firebird.
Yeah, and honestly, you know, he's just been having an absolutely fantastic race, absolutely error-free race. And yeah, just overall a really, really good run from him. You know, no mistakes from him the entire way through. I'm still just, you know, a little bit hung up on, you know, what could have been. Because, well, you know, Reese Gardner, just absolutely fantastic run from him. And I think, I actually saw him just now waiting in the interview channel. So right after the race ends, I think before anyone else, I'd love to have him in for an interview.
I saw him up there as well. I think that he is probably strolling down to the commentary booth after getting taken out of the race there. And yeah, it'd be interesting to talk with Reese and kind of get his thoughts on how it all unfolded for him. But our leader, driver of the 17 here, just on cruise control. He's just got to manage it for about another 2 laps. Call it another lap and a half here, since we're already through a handful of corners here at Lime Rock Park. And he's going to see that white flag. Look at him, even having a little bit of... still laying down those 11s coming out of those corners, letting everybody know who's the dominant driver. It has been all Simoncic ever since he got out front.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, Jurne with his consistency, you know, still running very, very fast laps. Still running, oh my goodness, and actually running into the grass there. Now starting his final lap of the race. So, you know, one more run around this lap, 56.1. So really, really fast, really, really speedy from him. And yeah, I'd say other than Reese with his absolute raw pace that he brought early on the race with the 55.468, the fastest lap of the race, you know, we saw some amazing driving here today as Yannick comes up to, that is Steve Carman, I think. Oh no, sorry, Chris Gordon. The wrong Rally International car. The AM winner, actually.
And I'm seeing Jurne actually lift off of the gas right here. I think that this is the smartest move he can possibly do. Don't put yourself in danger. You've got 12 seconds on second place. He's going to follow the number 88 to the line, the round 4 winner of the Genisus Extreme Trans Am Racing Challenge by HRSC. Jurne Simoncic collects another checkered flag. You see the number 88 directly in front. He's still got a full another lap. He's the leader of the AM class, but this is second place. Martin Beyer, part of the CUDA crew, putting that Plymouth on the podium, and a terrific job right here from Riley Wyans, standing in 3rd place. And really, there's only a few cars that are still on the lead lap that can actually go around and race. Darren Andrews, who finished 4th, was a lap down, so he's already done with the race. Nicholas, this is our AM class leader. He can pretty much cruise to the checkered flag.
Yeah, and again, you know, that number 88, Chris, absolutely fantastic race from him. Bringing it home, you know, basically staying out of trouble the entire way, and I think he'll be very, very happy with that overall result here, coming across the finish line now for the last time. And yeah, I think that's our last finisher. And I think now it's also quite good time to start getting some interviews in. And for this, oh, actually, yeah, let's have a look at the results first.
We've got our race winner. That was the driver of the number 17, the Rafa Racing Club Pontiac Firebird. It is Jurne Simoncic. Remember, really, once he got out front, there was no challenging him. And this is your pro class results that we've got on the screen. Martin Beyer with a terrific drive himself, finishing in 2nd. Riley Wyans in 3rd place in that Ford Mustang. How about that? We've got 4 different manufacturers filling up the top 4 spots. Darren Andrews finishing in that 4th place position. Jackson Robillard finishing with a top 5. Matt Wright, after coming into contact with that number 98 late in the race, will finish in 6th. Nicholas Kirsten had a few little off-track incidents, finishes in 7th. Gerard Rion finishes in 8th. David Bakaceladon finishes in 9th. Reese Gardner finishes in the 10th place in that pro class. Then across the page is Mantis Iskanitis with a DNF. Unfortunately, all of these names here, Robin DeVos, Austin Birchfield, Dylan Beveridge, David Purchase, and Ross McGregor, all here DNFs, did not see the checkered flag. But that takes us over to our AM class results, Nicholas.
Yes, absolutely. And as we said multiple times, Chris Gordon with an absolutely, well, pretty much flawless drive, keeping out of trouble the entire way, running very, very nicely, and finishing in a convincing win. 2 laps ahead of P2, Steph Hermans. The first good result, actually, for Team Mild Disappointment, and I think this is definitely better than a mild disappointment for them. Then Paul Starsovs keeps it clean as well in the race, 3rd place in AM. Filippo Marazzi profited from a couple of incidents as well to finish in 4th place. Jason Field, of course, as a guest starter, doesn't get counted as an AM driver, so here right now he's getting counted in 5th place, but of course, he in the end will be counted as a guest driver, so he's not counting for points. So Bruno Chacon for championship points takes 5th place, and last place in the finishers here in AM, 6th place, Declan Brush.
Well, it looks like we've got a few interviews lined up, and we have Reese Gardner joining us in the booth. I know it's a little bit of a heartbreak story here for you today. The fastest lap of the race, yet you didn't see the checkered flag. What was it like from your point of view, Reese?
Frustrating, really. I don't think I've ever been so angry after a race, to be honest, because I mean, I put myself into the position. First off, like, the first stint went perfectly. I couldn't have asked for more from that. The car felt great, and then unfortunately I just got caught up in traffic with Riley in my second stint and went for a spin, and then I spun twice on my own. So I decided to just keep committing to the 2-stop strategy I wanted. And then towards the end, I don't know, I passed Darren and Jackson. Then a couple of lap cars got together in front of me and got into me, and I fell through the track, which was fun.
Yeah,
Definitely a disappointing day, but Nicholas, go ahead.
Just a lot of bad luck there, but overall, you know, your pace was just that of another world, honestly, man. I gotta say, I really didn't expect you to be, you know, that competitive with the 2-stop strategy when I realized that Yanni was going for a 1-stop. But I think with that gap, honestly, you could have been challenging for the win. And, you know, I think it's also a thing of, you know, further on through the season, you guys are also getting more familiar with the car, of course. Do you think that you can perchance take a few, like, fighting chances like this to Brad Champton or any of the future rounds as well?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think I definitely have it in me to challenge for wins. You know, we were familiarizing ourselves with the cars over the first couple of rounds, and I mean, I wish I hadn't missed Mont Tremblant, but I had a very good reason to, and at the end of the day, I'm glad that I did, because I got to spend some time with people I love. But in any case, yeah, I think Bridgehampton's going to be a good one for the Cooters. It's got those nice flowing corners and some long straights, so maybe we'll be able to challenge for the win there. But yeah, I don't know. I guess I can take away a positive in that my pace was fantastic here, but at the end of the day, the result didn't come, so it doesn't mean much to me in the moment.
Well, Reese, thank you so much for coming out and racing with us, and thank you for sharing the broadcast booth with me earlier today, and hopefully everything will work out much better for you next time on track.
Thanks, guys.
That was Reese Gardner. It looks like we're going to bring in our race winner. Jurne Simončić is now joining us. Jurne, first of all, congratulations on yet another very dominating race win.
Thank you. Well, it was not going to be as dominating as it seemed in the end, but well, Reese had his problems, and yeah, then I had it a bit easier till the end.
I want to ask you about the first third of the race. It seemed like you were kind of stuck with the track position, and a couple cars actually got by you. What was holding you back early on in comparison to what we had the last third, or really the last half of the race, where you just went out there and dominated?
Well, it was the big master plan of CUDA crew. So as we were chatting now with the guys, I was either going to full push and like I got P2, but then my plan was to fuel save a little bit so that it's gonna be easier in the last stint. But I could not really do that in clean air, and as soon as I overtook Martin, he was like suddenly having great pace again, and he was easily in my tow. And then the Pontiac has like 40 horsepower less, so on the straight it's very difficult. And when I saw him going for it, I thought, well, I guess I should not defend here because I'm losing my battle towards Reese. But as soon as I was P3, I realized, well, Martin is going slow again, so I'm losing the battle again. But I just needed to wait a little bit for the traffic to get a chance, or maybe for my tires to come back at me. So yeah, that was slightly frustrating third, let's say.
Well, you did an excellent job once you got out in clean air. You executed the strategy very well. Congratulations on another win.
Thank you so much.
That was our race winner, Jurne Simoncic, and I believe we actually have Martin Beyer, our second place finisher, standing by with Nicholas.
Of it today, but I would have loved to end up in P3 with Reese in P1. We had it all planned perfectly.
Yeah,
I was
just
meant
really
to
bad
be the
luck for you
roadblock.
guys.
I was meant to be the roadblock. I kept everybody behind. Reese was ahead 10 seconds, something like that. And yeah, I was not sure if the two-stopper of Reese was a good idea, but Matt and Reese said, let's do a two-stopper, and I said, I go on the one-stop and I will play the roadblock then and let you guys go. But
So
yeah,
the-
it didn't really work out.
Yeah, so the different strategies they're definitely at play. And I mean, quite honestly, for the first third of the race, Janne was actually saying, it was a frustrating first third of the race.
Of course.
Absolutely. I think that was a bit catharsis as well after that finish, after that incident last race, of course.
I
And
also had the feeling in the very, very first few laps, he didn't chase me as hard because of what happened. But then there was one situation where he backed out, and then I knew I had it all. So the advantage he gave me, that was used up, and then he would race hard. So, and then he got away. Yeah.
Yeah, but either way, we already said with Reese earlier, you guys have started to get really familiar with that Plymouth CUDA now, and he said, he's very confident that he's in the future, for example, for Bridgehampton, that he's going to be able to finish 4 wins. And, of course, Watkins Glen and Sonoma are the 2 races after that, as we're going across the states again.
Yeah.
How are you expecting, the ebb and the flow of the racing in this season to keep going at this point?
I don't know. So Reset has done excellent setup work. We all basically ran the same things. I didn't take the very last changes he did, just because I didn't do any more practice. But the car is very drivable, very nice. Unfortunately, I think I will miss the next 2 races again. So these were my first 2 shots. Maybe I can make the season finally in the end. But yeah, for now I'm happy that I have 1 podium in the books.
Yeah, definitely a fantastic race from you today. Any shoutouts you want to do?
Yeah, Riley. Excellent race from Riley today. Was really hard for me to follow him in the beginning. Then as my car got lighter and he used up his tires, I had the upper hand, but it was really hard to overtake. Really nice race.
Yeah, that's fantastic to hear. Great sportsmanship among you guys. Congratulations once again, Martin. and enjoy it. Celebrate well.
Yeah, thanks. Bye-bye.
Looks like we've got a couple more lined up. I believe we've got our final podium finisher. That's going to be Riley Wyans joining us. He was the driver of that Mustang, providing so much action. Congratulations on the third place finish, Riley.
Yeah, thanks. It was great to bring some pace today. Definitely the most pace I think I've shown in any R Factor 2 event, and it felt great.
You had to work for it, didn't you? It seemed like you were in a battle, literally from the drop of the green all the way to the end there at the checkered flag. Did you feel that maybe the Mustang had certain strengths at areas of the stint or maybe on one end of the racetrack in comparison to those Plymouth Cudas you were mainly racing?
I had some ideas of what I expected them to excel at versus me in the larger cars. I knew that they were going to be, well, really hard to pass if they got around me, as wide as they were. And I think you saw that the first half, the first stint. But the car, I felt like if it was either me or my setup or my car felt really good over the back half of the track through the faster stuff. I felt like I could make up time there. But yeah, the battles never ended. It was basically just tried to ignore the mirror and focus on my marks. And it was not come easy.
Well, I think you did a tremendous job out there representing that Ford Blue Oval brand out front. So congrats on today's third place finish.
Yeah, thanks. I think it was a combined effort. Me and Austin put a lot of work into the setup for the Mustang. I think we need to take some time and trickle that down to Declan and the Camaro and try to bring him into the points more often. Now that he's in AM, I think that's something he's capable of from a team perspective. And the race today was a highlight, I think, of the season for me. I'll have to see what happened to Austin. I'm not sure, but just thanks to everybody for coming out and racing clean. I got to be a part of some incredible moments on track that you wouldn't get in a different group of people. So it was electric. It was a lot of fun.
That was the driver of that lead Ford Mustang, Riley Wyans, on the final step of the podium. And I think we've got one more interview lined up. That is going to include our AM class winner standing by with Nicholas.
Well, Mr. Gordon.
Hello.
After the last race weekend, I think since you missed Mont Tremblant, your teammates was able to profit quite a bit, leading by 30 points, but you've pretty much less than half that gap now, only 10 points behind them by any predictable margin. And obviously, with a very, very dominating AM class win, take us through it, mate.
Well, first I'd like to thank Nikolai for not showing up to this race and giving me the points. Yeah, it was a pretty fun first few laps. These cars are very hard to drive, so I got into a few little battles there in probably the first 10 laps or so, and didn't realize somewhere around lap 15 when I looked at my tire condition that I was supposed to be doing a one-stopper. So kind of slowed down a bit, and the rest of the race was just trying to manage fuel and just keep it going.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that's pretty much the impression we got as well. After that first little bit of you fighting for positions, you basically just tried to reduce it a little bit, keep it calm as possible, and just sort of went stealth mode. You went completely under the radar, I think, not just for us, but for everyone else, and essentially just, had a very calm and collected race, and all of a sudden you were in the lead by 2 laps and in for the class win.
Yeah, just try to manage the gaps and try not to make the highlight reel by taking out one of the leaders.
I absolutely love it. And overall, obviously quite good as well for your team, Rally International. Since your teammate Robin DeVos, I think, had a DNF earlier. Do you have any news on that, how that happened? Looked a bit odd, FCR was pulling off.
I'm not sure. I think he was having some trouble with his tires and just wasn't feeling it.
That's fair enough. But nevertheless, even with only, I think that's actually the first time this season that only one Rally International car is finishing. And despite that, you're still taking away 20 points. Any shout-outs you want to make?
Oh, no, not really. Just thanks to you guys for putting this great championship on for us.
Always happy to. I hope you're also there for the next season.
most likely.
Right, then have a good evening, celebrate well, and yeah. We'll see you again, hopefully, for next round.
I'll be there.
That was your AM class winner. That was Chris Gordon. Did a terrific job today. And we're going to be taking a look at what is next. We've done 4 rounds here with the HSRC, and round number 5 is headed over to Bridgehampton Race Circuit here at the end of June. Then we close it out with Watkins Glen and a trip over to the West Coast at Sonoma Raceway. 3 fantastic vintage racing circuits that have been around for a very long time. A fitting way to close out the final few rounds here in this Trans Am series, Nicholas.
Yeah, exactly. And I think especially, with our start being at Riverside and then pretty much the second half of the season starting with Bridgehampton, I just wanted to have a couple of the circuits in there that we just can't have anymore nowadays. But also, as I basically made the schedule, I realized, oh yeah, we're kind of just going across the states once in a whole big circle. So I think it's a very good, Trans-American championship, very much so as in the title.
Well, it's only fitting that you started off at Riverside, just like what you were talking about, being able to recreate this and ultimately going to a lot of racetracks that are still around, but some that aren't in existence anymore. But if you liked everything that you saw here today, make sure to tune in next time. Thanks to the team today. That includes Nicholas, myself, and Daniel. The next race for the Genisus Extreme Trans Am Racing Challenge by HRSC is going to be round number 5 at Bridgehampton on June 29th there. But until next time, race clean, race hard, and we'll see you on the track.
As well as contact already. The number 3 goes sideways fire into the wall. And he's already bounced off the side of the car next to him. I'm not sure if they just wobbled.